Behind the Lines.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Season 3 of Behind the Lines, where we bring the experts to you. I'm Evan Morrison from GameSense, hosting with Ty Tremblay, and this week we'll be discussing how to improve your team. Tonight, we're going to have a roundtable discussion on the topic, followed by 30 minutes of question and answers with you, the audience.
Before we hand it off to our experts, we do need to mention that the views expressed by Behind the Lines and the guest are those of the individual, and not necessarily the views of first participants.
Don't forget that you can submit questions to us throughout the show by tweeting at FRC GameSense with hashtag FRCBTL, emailing btl@frcgamesense.com, or by typing !Q in the Twitch stream chat.
With that, we're really excited to have some great guests on today. We'll let them introduce themselves. You first, Steve.
Oh, hey, I'm Steve McKinney from Team 987. Was a former student on the team, graduated in 2004, and I've been full-time coaching since 2011.
I'm Gabriel Salas, and I'm a former alumni of Team 233, Pink Team. Mentor them whenever I have an opportunity, but also involved heavily with RoboShow Orlando, along with Robot in 3 Days.
Awesome. Welcome, guys. So before we really kick things off, Ty, let's go over what we're not going to talk about.
Yeah, the first thing I'd like to kick around the group is we'd like to discuss what this show isn't about. And the first thing I'm going to say is that this is not going to be a show about how you can become, it's not going to be like one of those BuzzFeed shows where, 5 crazy steps to make you like 254 in one day. This is going to be a show about how to make your team better next year and the year after that and the year after that. Steve, do you have anything to add to that?
No, definitely. I think that there is this kind of misconception that these awesome teams did come out of nowhere because a lot of teams haven't been in first for decades, you know what I mean? So you see teams like 11-14, like 254, you know what I mean? And you're like, wow, they're so good. And it's like, well, they didn't start, nobody started like that. They had to build up to that.
Yeah, and I think something that's important to remember is 90% of the people that are involved in FRC are really only involved for 4 years. So when you're a student and you're participating on a team, you haven't seen the growth of teams over the time.
Yeah, I know as a former 971 alumni, right? Back when I was on the team, we were terrible. We didn't play in playoffs. It was called eliminations back then, and it was kind of a slow incremental improvement process, and then all of a sudden, you get picked 24th by 111 and 67 in 2009, win a world championship. Everybody comes back inspired, and even after that, there was still a couple rough years, but now everybody's like, oh yeah, 971, they're this total powerhouse. Well, but they weren't always that way. So I definitely think that students coming into the program now may get the conception that all of these great teams have always been great. And while many of them have been amazing for a long time, that doesn't mean that they just became amazing overnight.
Mm-hmm.
But to piggyback on that idea, 6 weeks is design and build. That's a short amount of time to become a world champion at something. I don't know any other sport that does that and has that. So for a lot of students, to have the opportunity in a short amount of time to be able to hit a pinnacle in your high school career and be involved in, on Einstein, is amazing. I mean, to have that exposure, to be involved and to inspire not only your community, but also others as well.
Yeah, I think that's certainly one of the really cool things about the program, with the length of the season, and then the flip side of that is how much time you have in between seasons to work on improving your team, etc. That as a student and as mentors, as a team, you can drastically improve your team year to year, and over the course of a couple years, really start showing some incredibly strong results, which I think kind of gets us into our next topic, and maybe the meat of what we're going to talk about tonight, which is setting and agreeing on goals as a team. And this is, I think a lot of teams don't take the time to really even just writing it down and agreeing on as a team, this is our goal for this season, for this year, for whatever. I don't know, Gabe, do you have any insight on that?
With our insight, like with Pink, traditionally what we do is we kind of analyze the game, and especially on Robot in 3 days, we try to figure out all the rules, try to be very acquainted with them, and figure out what would be the best game-winning design or strategy. Design will come later, but when you figure out what is the one thing your robot must do in order to compete and excel and do well in this year's game. And so with a team on Pink, we usually have 3 days where we hash out the rules, figure out what it is that we need to do to accomplish to win the game, and build a robot around that game-winning design. In Robot in 3 days, we don't really have that opportunity. It's mostly, put something together that actually is competitive and one or two important aspects of the game.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And to piggyback off of that, maybe even go one step back, is what defines competitive, what defines success for your team, right? Is winning a regional success? Is making it to championship success? Is just getting picked for playoffs success? Is winning a particular award success? Maybe it doesn't have anything to do with the on-field robot performance, but your team really wants to win a design award or a culture award or something like that. Coming together and agreeing as a team what is success, I think is kind of an understated part of FIRST.
Yeah, thank you for elaborating on that. Go ahead.
No, I think that's a very important distinction to make. Is defining what is success, but then there's also understanding the scope of what you're defining as success. For example, a rookie team probably shouldn't have the goal to come out and win world championship chairmans, and define that as, our season will be successful if. Steve, you guys just recently won world championship chairmans. Can you tell us a little bit about what your goal setting process for that was?
Sure, yeah. So I was gonna say I lost it in there somewhere, but setting a goal, having something, what Gabe said, for robot design, I will jump back to the chairman's thing because they're kind of go hand in hand with each other. But setting a goal of what you think is what you have to do, the bare minimum that you can do and how you can improve on that. For chairman's, like anything, winning a world champion chairman's award is like years and oftentimes decades of dedication and work from a lot of different people into that. We really kicked it off into 2010 is when we really set our sights on one day potentially winning the championship chairman's award. It was a goal for our team because we had just won our second chairman's award in 2009, and we were noticing that when we had branched out, when we had first started our team, we were heavily, I don't want to say not a chairman's team because that's a bad thing to say. I'll kind of talk more about it later, but I feel like every team should be a chairman's team. I'll go into the reasons as to why, but this is one of the main reasons why, is it really broadened our horizons. We were getting a bunch of students. We were having more success as a program by trying to win that chairman's award. So we were getting a bunch of students who otherwise would have no interest in coming and building stuff out of metal, building a robot, programming and stuff like that. We were getting these people involved in our team, and some of them were getting involved in certain aspects of the competition and stuff like that, like scouting. Some people like, you know, designing different things on the robot and stuff like that. Sometimes they would branch into the technical side of things, but yeah, like I feel like success breeds success. I know everybody says that 1,000 times. So we had won those 2 chairman's awards, and we were like, okay, we want to set our sights higher. And it was, I mean, a process, but really our team was made better as like setting that goal, setting the fact that, yeah, we want to win a championship chairman's award. And we tried and failed for many years, you know what I mean? So it just kind of helped us drive harder, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I want to kick off on one of the themes that you mentioned there about, you know, you won the chairman's award twice there, right? And I think there's something to be said about setting, at least in the early stages, setting goals for consistency, right? It doesn't make sense to start setting your goals necessarily higher and higher until you've shown that you can consistently hit a target, right? So as 987, you guys weren't saying we're going for championship chairman's award before you'd won a chairman's award, right?
Oh no, definitely not. No.
Right. You're saying, okay, let's put this together, and after you've won it a couple times, now it's time to turn the attention towards, okay, how do we improve on that result, right? How do we take the winning it every year and get ourselves to the Hall of Fame type thing. And so, you know, for a team that maybe is consistently getting into playoffs but not winning events or getting to finals, right? Or a team that maybe doesn't even consistently get to playoffs, setting a baseline goal of we as a team, right? And I think it's important to remember that setting the goal means that your entire team, mentors and students, acknowledge that this is the goal and this is what you're working towards. But setting that goal of, okay, we want to get to playoffs at every event that we attend. Okay, that's year one. And if you're successful in that, then the next year you can say, okay, we've demonstrated that we can get to playoffs. Now we want to make it to finals. Now we want to, you know, et cetera. And sort of building off of that, as opposed to jumping straight to well, I want to win an event, right? And then you start leapfrogging steps in the process. So, Ty, I think your team has had 319 has had a lot of success with this recently. And do you want to maybe talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I think this actually segues really well into the setting expectations topic here. I was on 319 from 2004 to 2007, graduated, went to college at WPI, was on 190 until 2011, and I came back in 2012 to 319. When I got back to 2012 and 319, my expectations had exploded because 190 had won the world championship just before me. We had won a regional while I was there, and we had successful robots. We won design awards. We had made these amazing things with CNC machines, and we had tons of scouting data, and it was great. And, you know, not every team is like that, but I came back somewhat naively to 319 in 2012, and it was, my expectations were way, way, way too high. I think, I think it's important to say that your expectations can be as high as you want as long as you've got the time to execute them. So mine was like, oh, we just need to build this awesome robot in this year and we'll be good. And I think it's important to, as a mentor that year, to realize that I was kind of dragging my team along with me versus pushing them to exceed the boundaries that they want to go with. So I wanted to know what you guys were thinking in terms of dragging versus pushing, where, you know, I think a morale comes into there as well. So, Gabe, what thoughts do you have there?
When it comes to pushing versus dragging, I feel that as long as it's established on the priorities and what the goals are for the team is what's critical, and following through to the very end. When you evaluate where the team is at right now and where it's going, you have to re-ask yourselves the same question. Is this a priority? Is this a goal that the team wants? The answer is yes, can continue forward. And if they're still motivated, then that's definitely a good sign. Dragging would be, it's like hitting your head against the wall. It would be like you're trying to force an idea to work and nothing seems to work, nothing seems to be coincided. And at that point, you have to take a step back and punt. You have to reevaluate exactly where's the breakdown and figure out what would be a better alternative or what would be a better solution laterally, or possibly, scrubbing that idea for the time being, focus on something else, and then come back to it later. So in that process, you may need to evaluate constantly. And the more often that you evaluate and test and reevaluate, that's the key, the better off you are and the more successful your team will be.
Yeah, I wanna throw one point into this before I kick it over to Steve and get his thoughts. But I think it's important to note that it can be students or mentors that are doing the dragging or the pushing here. I've certainly been involved with and been on teams where there was one or two students who really were inspired and really wanted the team to do better or to maintain a certain level of excellence. And that sort of drive and enthusiasm wasn't necessarily shared by their teammates or their mentors. And so working with that student to maybe understand the expectations and try and work that out so that they're not feeling like the team let them down, and the team isn't feeling like this student is going off and trying to just do everything by himself. So making sure that there's an understanding, and even if not everybody necessarily has the same opinion, I really believe it's important that the students and the mentors come to some agreement that of what the expectation is for the season, for what success is, or for what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Definitely knowing the expectations, because if they're not in alignment, if someone's expectations are different, someone is going to be dragging. And whether it is the student or the mentor, when you have somebody dragging, you lose people or you burn people out. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I know I briefly told before the show, was talking to you guys about our 2010 year. It was a year where we set the goal for, this is a robot performance goal. We said, hey, we want to climb the tower at the end, and we want to grab 2 other robots and lift them with us. And I mean, this is in 2010. We didn't have the resources and stuff that we have now. We definitely weren't the team then that we are today. And we set up with this huge lofty goal. And I mean, I think a lot of people knew we probably couldn't do it, but for whatever reason, it kind of stuck. And so we had people dragging, and people were really trying, mentors and students. And it was kind of divided, because half the team was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's build this impossible robot to build by even a lot of team today's standards. And, half the people were like, nah, this is not going to work. And so, I mean, our performance wasn't that bad that year. We were finalists in 2 regionals, but just team dynamic behind the scenes kind of thing, the thing that people don't see, with their own teams and stuff like that. It was just a real rough year for our team.
That's something similar to what 319, well, I wouldn't say similar, but along the same topic, 319 had basically we learned that lesson as well, but from the positive side of things. In 2012, I tried to drag the team along, and it didn't quite work, and we had a successful year. 2013, we said we're going to get to the top of that pyramid, and shooting frisbees became our secondary idea, which was a terrible idea. But we were like, we're going to get to the top. We never even climbed to the top of that pyramid in the whole season. Then the most fun we ever had in that whole year was when we ripped the climber off the robot, slapped together a quick 10-point hanger, and then went and shot frisbees. So then in 2014, we just said, all right, we're going to get the ball and we're going to throw the ball. And if, hopefully it goes over the truss and in the goal at the same, we can do that. And that was probably the second most fun year I've ever had. And it almost seems like, from what I've been seeing, and I'm new to this whole thing, is my expectations for the season almost seem to go down, so to speak, every single year. What I expect our team to be able to do and what I'm shooting for seems to go down, but our success and our enjoyment of the season goes up. And like 2016, we started out, we didn't even have any plans to shoot high. We were going to go low goal, and we won our first 2 Blue Banners of the year, and we were ranked 5th going into the district championship, and we had an absolute blast, and our team has doubled since then. Did any of you have a similar experience with that?
I kind of can hit on that real quick, because I was going to go back when we were talking about the goal setting thing. I kind of missed out on this, is that on 987, every year we ask ourselves, we want to do one thing well. Like, what's the one thing? And we started out, we kind of did that. In 2010, we kind of picked the wrong one thing to do well. But like a good example is in 2004, when I was actually a student on the team as my senior year, and we were still very fledgling. I mean, we were making our only power tools were a jigsaw. I think we had a drill press in there. I mean, we're human CNCing stuff out of plastic and metal and stuff like that. But we were for sure going to hang from that pole, because it was like 50 points. We're like, that's a lot of points. That's a single bonus. If we can do that, awesome, and do it 100% of the time, then maybe somebody will pick us. You know what I mean? So that was our one goal, and we did. We had a blast that year. I mean, the next year after that, in 2005, we won our first regional. So I think it does. Sometimes it's easy to get lost when there's so many things that you want to set as goals, but I think it's important for every team to pick one thing that year that you're just going to kill it for sure. You know what I mean? And if you can't achieve that goal, at least hopefully you learn something along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll pick up from there that I think, when you're talking about robot performance, right, there's 3 stages. There's picking the right strategy. There's building the right robot to execute that strategy, and then there's actually executing the strategy with the robot. And when a team is evaluating their options, and then again, I'm also a big proponent at the end of the season of the team all getting back together and having a big discussion about how the season went relative to those goals that they set at the beginning. I think it's really important from a robot standpoint to identify if you hit on all of those, and if not, where in that process you went wrong. Because it's really easy to go at the end of the season, well, robot didn't work, right? Well, okay, which part of that? And you can apply the same thing to chairmans. You can apply the same thing to awards. I think they brought back chairman's feedback. That's correct? I believe so.
Yeah, they do have chairman's feedback.
Yeah,
okay.
Regionals this year.
Good.
For sure.
So you can look at that feedback, hopefully, and get an idea of where, what areas your team needs to improve in, whether it's the presentation or whether it's the specific things that your team is doing, or or what have you, or just look at other teams and what they've done. I think other measures of success are a little bit more difficult to metric, but you could, as a team, set team growth as a particular level of success. We want to have 10 or 20% more students stay active through the season, and whatever. But whatever it is, I think it's important to identify the difference between setting a goal that your team wasn't able to achieve, or setting the right goal but not taking the correct steps to actually achieve that. Because there's 2 different solutions there as far as continuous improvement.
I want to piggyback on the first thing you mentioned on the third topic, which is actually executing the plan of action. I think it's important to evaluate, the strengths and weaknesses of a team prior to build, and seeing what is realistic versus what is nice. So a lot of teams, will have opportunities to have, resources like a CNC machine or something like more high end. For a lot of teams, that would be something nice if we have the opportunity to have that. Maybe we can incorporate with robot design. Maybe we can fabricate more parts. Maybe it'll allow us to do more stuff. But working well within reason of the capabilities of the mentors and the students, along with the resources available, that includes fundraising, that includes additional parts, it includes all that. If you're able to budget that time along with the resources effectively, that will determine a lot of the success on the teams and understanding what they can and cannot do. And if you do not have access to CNC, that is fine. You can still build a phenomenal robot from kit of parts, along with a lot of resources available. As long as you have the opportunity to be able to use iterative design, that's to test, retest, evaluate, and make better every step of the process, that is a surefire sign of success for majority teams. And like we mentioned earlier with rookie teams, most of the time, your first year is not going to go as great as you hope. That's okay. As long as you learn from those mistakes and build upon that, prevent that from happening in the following season, that's truly a great sign of a good team to continue their success onward.
Yeah, I really like the end of what you said there, because it also gets into a little bit of what makes certain teams so successful year after year. And a lot of it is just experience and having a team structure and a team culture that's set up to be able to pass the knowledge along. If every 4 years your team is relearning the same mistakes over and over again because you're graduating students and the knowledge isn't getting passed along, then you're not going to improve nearly as much as a team who has some kind of structure set up to, either have the mentors retain a lot of the knowledge and longtime mentors be able to impart that, and or have students that are mentoring the younger students and passing their knowledge along and ensuring that when they leave the team, somebody still on the team is taking those lessons that they've learned with them, so that the team doesn't continue to make the same mistakes or fall into the same pits again. And then the other thing that you mentioned was resources and money, and I think that's a really important topic because I think that's something that a lot of teams struggle with and a lot of teams think about when they think about improving.
Mm-hmm. My biggest frustration with talking about good teams is when a team says, or somebody's talking about a really great team, like, oh yeah, they've got tons of money, they can do anything that they want. And they're not good because they have money. They have money because they're good. It builds, right? And I think that they kind of go hand in hand. It's not that you need money to be good, but money enables you to be better. I think it can really open up some doors for you, but there are a ton of core foundational aspects of being an FRC team that you almost don't need any money at all to accomplish.
I would definitely agree with that. I think money is a tool like anything else. It's nice to have a CNC. It's nice to have, a drill press. It's nice to have machining equipment. It's nice to have money too to buy that machining equipment. And FRC teams are expensive. Travel eats up a ton of our budget and stuff like that. But yeah, to echo kind of what you guys were saying about, oh yeah, this team is good. They've got so much money. I promise you can be good with not having a very big budget at all. I think a lot of teams would probably be surprised by what our budget is from year to year. We don't have a lot of money, and our school is not a private school. We're a Title I inner city school. It kind of helps us out with a lot of grant funding. We're eligible for a lot of grants that we otherwise wouldn't be able for. But I still think, a lot of teams would be surprised on just how little budget we operate on. And we won a world championship in 2007 with definitely less than $15,000 budget. I would say that for the year. So it's definitely useful. It's a good tool, but it is for sure not everything.
Mm-hmm. I think that if you don't have the right process set up on your team, the right structure or whatever, to actually make use of incremental improvements, then the money that you do have, because all first teams do have to have some amount of money to register and operate, etc., isn't necessarily as well spent. And I think, and I'll kick it to Gabe after this for his thoughts, but I think it's really important to recognize that teams' ability to sell themselves to potential sponsors or donors, etc., can be directly related to the goals that they set for themselves. And being able to say to a sponsor, look, we're trying to qualify for the World Championship, or we're trying to qualify for the district championship, or this is what success is for our teams. That resonates with a lot of potential donors who say, okay, I understand where you're trying to go. I understand why you need the money that you're asking for to get here. And then you can come back to them at the end of the season and say, hey, we hit our goal. We exceeded our goal. We, XYZ, thank you for your support. And it makes donors and other funding sources a lot more likely to come back and support the team the next year, because they understand that your team, you're setting yourselves up for success. You're not just taking their money and doing something with it, right? And so I think there's a lot to be said for presenting yourself in terms of your team and your goals to potential sponsors there as well.
The majority of the time spent on the team is not actually designing and building the robot. It's actually networking, community outreach, and fundraising. And depending on your team, you may want to split that up differently. Sometimes you can have the opportunity to double dip. You're at a conference, so happen to talk to someone. Hey, can I talk to your company another time? We'll bring the robot. You can ask us any questions. We'll bring high schoolers. It'll be awesome. So there's ways that you can be creative in your fundraising efforts for the majority of the year, especially during summer break. You can do car washes, or you can organize summer related events where you can do like a golf tournament, sponsor it, have a lot of cool companies come in and sponsor their stuff as well. But the outreach and all the funds that's produced for something like that can go towards the team. So you can get a lot of these really neat ideas and ways to get your name out there by advertising your team, advertising local businesses, and having those businesses in return give you some sort of incentive to put their name on the robot, or for you to talk about this team, or oh yeah, they gave us food during build season, or some way that you could shamelessly plug those sponsors is one way that you can help improve your image with the team in the community, but also like in a way to actually get money out of it.
Definitely. One other thing that I want to talk with in terms of resources and money and funding is leveraging the free stuff that you get from First. So the example that I'll use here is the kit bot and machining resources. So if your team maybe gets access to some new machining resources, and let's say you used the kit bot last year, and you've designed this brand shiny new drivetrain that you want to try out. Maybe think twice before you actually spend those new machining resources on the drivetrain, and instead say, we get a free drivetrain from First in our kit if you choose not to opt out, and instead put those resources into making a better manipulator, etc. And so, there's very, very few teams, I think, and there are other options as well for off-the-shelf drivetrains besides the one that comes in the kit, but that one's free, right?
And it's really good.
And it's really
it's not bad. It's pretty good.
I think a lot of teams may have been thrown for a little bit of a loop last year, since it was functional, but it wasn't quite maybe as functional out of the box as we've come to expect in previous years. But the basics are all there. And so understanding that if resource limitations, whether it's money or whether it's fabrication capability, etc., for a team if that's what's potentially limiting you, that before you take a new resource and use it to upgrade something existing, make sure you know what the consequences of picking where you're putting your upgrades, right? Because those are finite resources, and I think a lot of teams will find that they'll get more leverage out of putting new machining resources or new money resources into the other parts rather than things that come free from first.
Mm-hmm.
So Ty, I think we've got one last topic if you want to kick that one off before we move into question and answers.
Yes. So I know that the topic of this show is about improving your team, and everybody probably has the same goals to try and look like one of those top tier best in the world teams in terms of chairman's award and on-field performance and anything else in between. But I'd like to talk about some of the red herrings, so to speak, that some of the top teams do that could distract a team that's trying to grow and improve. I'll kick off, for example, and say one of the red herrings that can really get you in trouble is a very complicated scouting system. Is if you look at teams that release their scouting systems online and they have apps and databases, and they're awesome and they're very powerful and they enable some amazing things, but you can really get, crawl down a rabbit hole on one of these scouting systems, and it's something like, I'd say you can get a 90th percentile scouting system on pen and paper and an Excel spreadsheet and some time in your hotel rooms. And that extra 10% is kind of what separates, the world champions, but that's not what this topic is about. So what are you guys' thoughts on scouting systems and or red herrings?
I'll kick it off first. When it comes to scouting, it comes down to what's going to work best with your team. What one scouting system may work for one team is designed entirely to complement their current team's robot. So based on your robot, you may have an awesome manipulator, a great drive chain, but what if you don't have a manipulator? A lot of your scouting is going to be based on who complements your team and your alliance. And so what's great for one team, that information will not be pertinent for another team that might look at that same information, that same data, because it's going to be skewed based on the team that's actually collecting that data.
I think that's a good point. I also want to mention that, there's other benefits to developing scouting apps besides the data collection side of it, right? If you've got students on your team that are interested and engaged in making an app for your team, by all means, right, let them express that and make the app. But by the same token, don't expect to be able to go pull some other team's app down and use it out of the box, because you don't necessarily know what their motivation for making that scouting system was. In a lot of cases, it's simply because there's a student who's interested in it and they're trying to find a way for their team and their resources to make their scouting a little bit better. And so if that's your team, by all means do it, but also understand that it may not result in necessarily better scouting data for your team. It may result in a great project for a few students on your team that gives you the same scouting data you already had, type thing. But beyond scouting, Steve, do you have any other thoughts on things, maybe from personal experience with 987, things that you guys do that you wouldn't recommend a team, maybe mid-level, etc., try and emulate right out of the box?
I don't know if I can really speak to that. Like, we haven't really changed what we've done in a long while, but I do want to hit on you said that with the scouting app, you could do 10, maybe 90% of that work. Or, you could probably, I always say this on our team, we could probably work half as hard or even way less than half as hard at something like scouting is a good example. We do work very hard at scouting, and we could probably get 90% out of it what we get. Now, does that 10% make the difference between, winning a world championship or a world award and not? I don't know, maybe, possibly. But it's I think that is important for a lot of these teams that you're talking about, the teams that we're focusing on that are trying to improve, that it doesn't necessarily, you don't have to spend the resources and the time that these teams that are, at the top tier are doing. You can spend less than half that time and probably get 90% of what they're doing with regards to scouting, but with regards to really anything like robot manipulators, parts, drivetrains, like you guys were saying, the kitbot drivetrain last year is probably, I would say it was probably 90% as good as what we spent hours and hours developing. And you could have spent 0 time developing that. You could have just pulled it out of the box. So, I can't really point to anything that, like, on our team, we have the luxury of having like a ton of kids. So we have a lot of kids available for things like scouting. We have a lot of kids available for things like designing pit banners and stuff like that. So I know exactly what it's like for teams that are, rookies or newer teams looking at that and saying, wow, they've got all these resources and all those kids that can do it. But I remember being on the team that was the rookie team or the second year team and walking up and seeing that exact same thing. Like Trucktown Thunder was one of the ones that blew me away. It was my first year on the team. I walk up and they've got big orange semi and I'm just like, wow, like that's big orange trailer is like more than 10 years probably worth of what our budget would be. And it was awesome. It was totally inspiring. 68 definitely inspired me. But yeah, I think that mid-level, you could call it. I hate to say that because it doesn't, there's not a big difference between a mid-level team and like somebody that wins a world championship. I wouldn't even call us a mid-level team, you know what I mean? In like years that we've been very successful. So
yeah, I think that's a very good point there. One of the other key points to touch on before we wrap it all up is, from a within the game perspective, what the top teams are shooting for from their strategies and designs versus what maybe makes sense for some of the other teams that aren't as well resourced or are as well resourced but aren't as experienced. Most of these, everybody kind of comes into the game and has this expectation that, oh, the teams on Einstein are going to be able to do everything. And so if we want to get to Einstein, we have to do everything. And so the first question is getting to Einstein really what you want to define as success for your team? Or maybe is a lower goal more appropriate for your resources? But the other is that's not necessarily true, and that throughout the years, it's kind of been shown that fairly frequently teams that do one thing very, very, very well, or a couple things very, very well, will often find themselves in a prime position to make a deep run at the championship. One of the things that I really like about the district system, we're in 5803. My team is in districts in Pacific Northwest. Is that it provides a path for advancement and goal setting that isn't just either win or get a wild card or not. And so we were able to set our goal this season as a rookie team of qualify for the World Championship, right? And we had some experienced mentors. We felt that was a reasonable goal. We had some students who really wanted to strive for that. But nowhere in that process does that involve us winning an event. It involved us saying, what do we need to do? We need to get enough points. How do we get enough points? Play on Saturday afternoon every event, right? And you set your goal as a team to play on Saturday afternoon at every event, you end up with a very different robot than if you set your goal as a team to win an event, right? Or give yourself the best shot. And so I think, there are some parallels to regional levels. It's not quite as much of a scale there, a spectrum, but definitely some things to think about is you don't have to go into the season and say, we're going to win Einstein. That's our goal. That's what we have to design a robot to do. Not every team has to do that. So I think we're going to have a quick summary from Ty and then get some of these questions because we've got a few good ones.
All right, we're going to move on to the question and answer section soon. But before, we've sat around and talked for about 45 minutes here about how to improve your team. And there's a few things that we want to drive home very, very clearly here. So the first thing is that improvement is a year-over-year project. You're not going to become the best team in the world next year or even, or this year. It's going to take many, many years. And it took every team many, many years, except for maybe in 1992 when there was only 1 year. So in order to do this and improve your team, you need to set goals so that your team has something to focus on. And to set these goals, you want to ask yourself, how does your team define its success? You want to make sure that those goals are attainable and that you have, because you need something that you can build on in order to build your success year over year. And then you need to do what you need to do in order to achieve those goals. If your goal, for example, is to be able to afford going to the World Championship, then you need to fundraise. If your goal is to win a district, then you need to work on your strategy and your engineering, et cetera, et cetera. So define your goal, make sure you can attain that goal, do what you need to do to reach that goal. And then finally, and pretty much, I would say just as importantly, is evaluate and reflect. Look back on the goals that you set and think about how you did them and how you did against them and what you can improve on for the next year. Does anybody have anything else to add? Does that somewhat sum it up?
No, nailed it.
All right.
That was awesome.
So let's go back and look at all the questions that we've gotten from our Twitch chat and from the Twitters. And
before we start this, we do want to mention that we are still taking questions. So if you have a question that you want to ask us, you can still tweet at us at FRC GameSense, #FRCPTL, or type it in the Twitch chat, !Q followed by your question. So with that, I think, Ty, you want to read us our first question?
Our first question is, where do parents fall into the equation? How can my team use them as a resource to improve, and what are the pitfalls? So we'll kick this to Gabe first.
Every team is different, and that's something that's decided between the mentors and the students and the involvement of parents. My involvement with the team is very, I don't want to say it's very exclusive, because there's only a handful of mentors that are allowed to interact with the students and help, because we don't want too many hands involved on the same project, because then no work will actually get done and accomplished. So with that in regards, we end up using the parents as more of like a support role of like, hey, can you bring the students food or snacks, or hey, can you run errands and grab supplies that they may need, or stuff like that. So in that regard, like as a support, parents are great. If a parent wants to be more involved and take up specific roles, like having a designated parent to do chairmans, or a designated parent to do like videography, or a designated parent to coordinate fundraising efforts, is excellent. So the biggest pitfall is pretty much making sure that you're just not saying yes to every parent. I know that a lot of parents want to see what their kids are doing and how they're involved, but being supportive of their students pursuing science, technology, and getting that exposure with engineering is great. And they can continue supporting their students by encouraging to continue robotics is probably the best thing that they can do in that regard, and allow them some free time to be able to have time to themselves and do other things they need to do around the house. But I know that a lot of parents want to be involved because it's cool, it's fun. And in that regards, having a designated liaison or head coach to say, all right, we need you to kind of fill this role. Can you help us out in this regard? And having very specific rules and boundaries, it's really important.
Yeah, definitely. I like almost was gonna say right at the end that you ended at the perfect time. Rules and boundaries, like, it's a big deal. Like we've had years, like you said, it kind of depends on your team. It even depends on the year too, the group of parents that you have. I mean, we've had the situation before where perhaps like parents have been maybe too involved. And I mean, yeah, you have to have somebody on the team, a mentor, a teacher, to be able to step in and say, hey, these are our boundaries. This is you're kind of stepping over the line, and it really gets tricky because we have parents stay there with the students too. We've been fortunate to have some parents that are, have skills like engineering parents and stuff like that are able to help us machine parts, that are able to help build field elements and stuff like that. And even their student is on the team too, and so there's situations like we can only bring a certain number of people on trips and stuff like that. So you just kind of have to set those rules and boundaries definitely going in. One thing that we do is we have a parent night at the beginning of the season because we have learned from our mistakes that we need to set these boundaries and guidelines early because we've had kind of conflict of interest situations before in the past where it's like it's a great resource for your team if you know how to use it, if the parents are there and can help out, but it can also lead to conflict and stuff like that.
A parents' night is great. There's a few teams here in New England that have a mandatory parents meeting right at the beginning of the season where you come with your students and all of the season, not the season guidelines, but the team guidelines are laid out right then and there. They know what the team does, who's who to contact, and then they're laid out and given the opportunities to get involved if they want to. So a parents' night is really great.
It is. I'll just add one more last thing. It's important because we have kids staying in our shop on school nights sometimes till like 8, 9 o'clock at night. I don't know if there's any sports or clubs or any other organization that does that kind of thing, and it blindsides a lot of these parents. So we learn, like I said, we learn from our mistakes. We need to say, hey, if your student wants to, obviously, he's your kid, so you gotta allow him. But if you allow him or not, but sometimes we're here late, so.
Yeah, I've one more thing to add, and then we'll move on to the next question. But I think just like we talked about with other resources, leveraging parents to help with things that can free up other mentors, I think is really important. Being able to hand off things like travel planning and logistics or meals or, making sure that all the approval forms with the school are collected and submitted on time. I think that's a really big thing that parents can do. And like everybody mentioned, having a parent meeting, making sure that the parents understand what the team is about, what the expectations are, how they can get involved. But just in general, that this is something that their students are interested in and they should be supporting.
Agreed.
All right. So our next question here is from the chat. How much should mentors be involved? Do they help design the robot? Do they stand back and let students do absolutely everything? So this is getting into the age-old debate, and I don't want to delve too deep into personal opinions on this one. I don't think, but I do want to tie it back to what we said at the beginning about setting expectations for your team and getting everybody on the same page. I think whatever your team decides is right for your team is fine, as long as everybody on the team understands that that's a decision that you're making. I don't know, Steven, what do you think about that?
I know it's cliche to say this, but what works for your team is going to be different than from what works for the team across the street from you. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, you do definitely need those boundaries and, guidelines and stuff like that. I will say, not trying to, reveal any personal opinions or anything like that, but there is a big misconception out there about a lot of the teams that you don't really know how a team operates unless you are on that team or work closely with that team. And so a lot of people jump to conclusions about a team, with little basis, just like things that they've heard, because I know that it's hard to believe that high school kids are doing this, but I have seen it with my own eyes. You know what I mean? And I wouldn't believe it either if I was an outsider to some of these teams and some of their organizations. But what a lot of these teams are doing with students, student-led and student-built, it is amazing. And you might think that it is, maybe more on the mentor side, but I can assure you that for a lot of teams, it's not that way. You would be amazed.
Yeah, I think the important thing for me is I define a mentor as somebody who enables and teaches. And if you have people that are doing that, if you have somebody that enables you as a student to do, or sorry, if you have a mentor that it's enabling the students to do as much as they can or as much as they want to do, then that's great. And the important thing to realize that for most students, they're not going to know everything that somebody with an engineering degree or a degree in general is going to know. So there's teaching that can be involved. So I think the important thing to remember is as long as the students come out of the season with ownership of what they worked on, then that's what defines a successful season for me as a mentor. This is, again, like Evan and Steve said, it's different for every team. But what I go in with is, if the students come out feeling as though they learned something and then they feel ownership of what they worked on, then I'm a happy guy.
I will add one thing to that, which is standing back and letting students do absolutely everything. To me, that's not mentoring, right? Mm-hmm. Mentors, the program has mentors for a very good reason, right? They're there to do something. Now, whether or not you choose to have mentors directly hands-on with the robot or the design or etc., I think is, that's a team decision. But if your mentors are just standing around talking and making sure that nobody's cutting a finger off, you don't really have mentors. You have babysitters. So that's kind of my opinion on the topic. Is just the mentors are there for a reason, and they're there for to help the students achieve what they want to achieve, and how your team chooses to engage them and enable that is up to the team.
I think it goes back to pushing versus dragging with the team that we kind of talked about. I mean, it's not really inspiring to see a team make a very simple mistake that you could have been like, all right, why are we doing this? Mm-hmm. And also there's a time sink, 6 weeks. I mean, to waste time on a dumb lesson like that, I think is really stupid. And that's me personally. It's a very strong opinion, but your time could be better spent in actually doing something cool with the robot and moving and pushing the team forward versus dragging in that instance.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that one. I think we've got time for maybe one more question here as we queue it up. And this is a good one. What do you do when part of your team is going in one direction or goal and another part is going in a different direction? So I don't know who wants to take this one first, but throw it out there for the crowd.
I can talk a little bit about it. Oh, okay, go ahead.
Oh, good.
Gotcha.
Put it out.
I'll put it out there. All right. This is something that's established within the first 2 or 3 days with the team. When we talked about priorities on what you want your team to excel at for that season. It doesn't have to be with robot design. It could be something like with chairmans. It could be having a business plan with fundraising. Whatever the team decided at the beginning of the year, you have to stick with it. Okay, so if the team decides that they're going to split and divide, and you know what, we want to do this or rather do that, you have to go back to that meeting and say, hey, we agreed for this vision for this year for our team, and we have to stick with it. There can be compromises. It is possible. However, if there's strong enough of a rift where no progress is being done, you may have to have another meeting with the team and say, hey, why are we going away from our original goal? You had 2 to 3 days to thoroughly discuss this as a cohesive unit, as a cohesive team. And to be able to have that rift doesn't produce any progress, because that's what's important. You have to progress forward, test, retest, evaluate. And if you're not doing that, you're not pushing the team forward, you're dragging. And so you need to have a meeting and discuss exactly why the team is going in different directions and where's the disconnect.
Yeah, I'll play off of the how you say compromise is possible, Gabe, because it is. I'll give you a for instance. This year, we had competing designs early on. A lot of the team wanted to build a kind of a 254-esque little low-wheeled shooter, and we had a group of the team that also wanted to build the arm kind of shooter on an arm thing that we wound up going with, and we said, okay, cool. Both of these are viable designs, and both sides felt strongly about it, and so, but we had kind of both develop independently. And we just kind of at a certain point we're like, okay, well, this arm one is working better right now. We do have a deadline, so we're gonna go with the arm one. And even the people that had worked on the wheel one kind of came to accept it. They're like, you know what, yeah, we're not making progress on this, and it resolved itself naturally and nicely. It doesn't always happen that way. I have this old PowerPoint from, I think it's Andy Baker, who says, eventually it's a democracy until eventually a mentor has to kind of step in and be the monarch and say, hey, it's we have to make a decision on this. And like you said, if the expectations are known, it's like, hey, we want to be successful. Maybe we can't go down this path. Maybe we kind of need to pick one way or the other.
For sure. I think that's that last point is really important, that at some point, theoretically, your team has some kind of leadership structure. And if your team doesn't have a leadership structure, implement a leadership structure, because it's really, really important to the way the team functions. And whatever that leadership structure is, at the end of the day, somebody has to make a decision, right? And if the team is actually completely split, when you start putting your goals together, right? If you have a team that half the team really wants to function one way and half the team really wants to function another way, at some point somebody has to say, this is how we're going to do it, and that person should have been identified beforehand, before this discussion, to be able to have that input and have the rest of the team rally around that and follow that. And sometimes rifts do form within teams, and some teams will lose students over that. And while it's not ideal, it's also okay. Because you can't have a team continue to function if it's trying to be two different teams. And so at the end of the day, somebody needs to make a decision on where your team is going, what the goal of the team is, and move on to discussing how you're going to achieve that, and try and be conscious of keeping everybody's input in mind, but also being able to move past that, I think, is really important. So I think that does it for tonight. I want to say thank you once again to Gabe and Steve for coming on and having a great discussion. And we will be back in 2 weeks with the next Behind the Lines. I don't know what the topic is offhand, but it will be published. And we also have been taking some notes throughout the show, so we'll be publishing something on the first website real shortly with kind of a summary of everything that we talked about. So I really enjoyed the discussion. Thanks, guys, both. And that'll do it for us. So have a good night, and we'll see you soon.
Bye, guys.